welcome.
And welcome in to Press Box Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles, along with Ross Grimsley and our very special guest from BaltimoreBaseball.com. That's our old friend, Rich Dubroff. Rich, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, Stan. How are you?
I'm doing good. Rich, first of all, do you have any skin in the World Series? Skin in the game in terms of who you're rooting for?
Well, I'm actually going to go to Game 2 in Houston as a fan,
Okay.
and I really don't. I really don't care. I don't. I never root, but I think that I'll be happy if Dusty Baker wins. I'll be happy if Brian Snitker wins. No real,
you can't
nothing.
lose.
Nothing really electric about the matchup, but just looking forward to it.
Right.
Before we get into talking about the O's and the 2021 season and what's in store this off season, anything else stand out during the postseason to you so far to date?
Yeah, how long the games are. When I looked at what was it, the White Sox, the 4 games of the White Sox and the Astros played averaged 4 hours and 6 minutes, and this is unsustainable. And the audiences are showing them that. It's one thing to have a good game that's 3 hours and 20 minutes, but going over 4 hours regularly is very difficult for most people.
I think
It's hard to stay up.
It's hard to stay up. I think the electronic home plate umpire is going to speed the game up. I really do. Nobody talks about that, but I think there'll be a lot less griping, a lot less getting in and out of the box, because you're going to know that the thing is going to call it the way the strike zone is.
Did you hear what happened out in Arizona, I guess, the other day with that?
No.
22 white baseball balls.
22 base.
4 hours and 40-something minutes or whatever, 30 minutes or whatever.
All right. Well, I've been wrong before.
Yeah, we all have.
Hey, Rich, to dig into the Orioles, just one overriding question. Did the 25 and 35 record of 2020, which was a .417 winning percentage, did that sort of give some false hope to the fans that this whole rebuild thing wasn't going to be quite as long as initially painted out as it would be?
Absolutely. I think that, people looked at it and they said, well, we're only 10 games under 500. Right. And that, the .417 winning percentage was basically a 95 loss season, which would have been an improvement over 108 losses the year before. But I think had they played a conventional 162 games last year, they would have had a record pretty close to what they had this year. I thought that they would be a little better than they were. I thought that they would lose somewhere in the high 90s. But I didn't think that I didn't think that they'd be as bad as they were. But yeah, I thought that people were really fooled by that short season. But that's what you had to judge on.
Ross, go ahead. I know you got a couple.
Obviously, Rich, the pitching is the biggest question mark, and is probably the biggest thing that has to be taken care of. And one of the things I asked somebody, in the years past when the Orioles were good, even when I played, there was always a pitching philosophy. With Ray Miller, with George Bamberger, there were certain things, and the pitching philosophy that I get and have heard that the Orioles have is throw your fastball up, throw your breaking ball down. That's it. So I'm trying to see where if they're blueprinting this like the Astros have never really developed any pitchers. and
Well, Lance McCullers.
one guy, so I'm going, and they traded or got free agents. One of the things, I'm sure that's probably on the horizon, but getting a pitcher to come to Camden Yards, first of all, you're going to have to overpay them, and then again, I'm going to go, I don't know if I want to really go there. What do you see as the, not the cure all, but to help the pitching? What do they have to do?
Well, I think what they're going to do, whether it's this winter or next winter, is they're going to start trading their surplus infield and outfield prospects for pitchers. If
Right.
you look back at Elias's history, he had a couple of number one picks in a row who were pitchers, and they didn't work out. Brady Aiken, who they couldn't sign, and Mark Appel, who turned out to be a huge disappointment. With Aiken, it turned out okay because they were able to draft Alex Bregman, the next year. But I think that sort of showed Elias that maybe it's really hard to draft pitching, and that maybe the way to get pitching is to let other people draft them and then trade for them when they've had a little bit of professional experience. And that's, I think, what you saw, like in the Bundy trade, when they got 4 right-handed pitchers, some of whom have looked okay in the minors. And then, some of the other guys that they've acquired, Kevin Smith, who pitched well at Bowie, but not well at Norfolk, who they got in the Miguel Castro trade. So I think that's sort of the blueprint of what you're looking at. I don't know if they're going to do that this year. If this off season is going to be the time to do that, or maybe next season. They have obviously, he had a couple of pitchers he inherited, good draft choices in Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall, and of course Rodriguez passed Hall this year because Hall was out with the elbow injury for most of the season. So I think that I think that's something to look out for in the near future, whether it's, as I said, this winter or next winter.
What with some of the I've read some things. Mountcastle is probably going to be at first base. Rushman will possibly be the catcher unless there is a strike, and that will change obviously a lot of different things. Tell us a little bit about, I heard a lot of good things about Stowers, the outfielder. He's hurt now. He hurt his back.
Stowers.
But a lot of good things have been said about this guy, and he is not that far away, I don't think. And he's going to get into a crowded outfield.
Well, he is. But you look at that outfield, and maybe when Stowers is ready to play, then that's the time that they look to move Anthony Santander, because Stowers moved up all the way from Aberdeen to Norfolk, and got shared the organizational Player of the Year award with Adley Rutschman, and he went to the Arizona Fall League, and now that stint has ended early because of what they say is a lower back injury. But Stowers, will go back to Norfolk, and we'll see how he progresses. Of course, Yusnel Diaz, who had been a hot prospect, had an awful 2021, and he's out at the AFL trying to see if he can salvage his career, because that's been a great disappointment. But Stowers looks like he can be a fine player.
Right.
And again, if they have this surplus of players, with Colton Cowser coming, in a year or two, and if Heston Kjerstad turns out that he can play, that they're going to be in a position, in a position of strength, and hopefully for them, be able to move surplus outfielders to get help at positions.
Rich, what's the word on Kjerstad? Because I know he was supposed to be playing during the summer and wasn't able to. What is the word on him?
He's working out at the instructional league in Sarasota. And they're not playing they're not playing games. It's just workouts, and they're hoping he's going to be ready for spring training, and then hopefully assigned to an affiliate. Maybe
Right.
Maybe he'll get to start at Delmarva. But the good thing, Ross, about young players is even with something as horrible as this, you can if you're young, you can recover quickly. Eduardo Rodriguez was able to recover and have a good, and pitch well for the Red Sox, and the Orioles are hoping the same thing with Kerstad.
My old friend Eddie Epstein, who was the Orioles' first kind of analytical guy back in the late '80s, he always used to say to me that the hitting tool is very resilient, which really speaks to the fact that if Kerstad can get healthy, the time away that he missed, while it's a bummer, it won't do severe damage to his career capability prospect. Your thoughts?
No, it shouldn't if everything is okay. And obviously, what he had was a very, very serious. Was very, very serious for people who are watching who don't know. Heston Kjerstad, who was the second overall pick by the Orioles in 2020, has not played because of myocarditis, which is an enlargement of which is an infection of the heart muscle. So he wasn't able to play, but he's now working out, and hopefully everything's going to be okay, and he'll move on with his career next year.
Rich, a couple questions about performances from this year. I want to start with the suspect guys that to me played themselves into suspect positions. I know the whole backstory on Trey and how fantastic it was through the All-Star game. The bottom line is the second portion of the season, the last 61 games, Trey Mancini, while he still batted .254, which shocks the heck out of me, he had 5 home runs and 16 RBIs. Was this just in the club's estimation and your estimation, just pure fatigue from everything involved with the comeback?
Yes. The man underwent colon cancer surgery in March 2020.
Right.
Had 5 months after recovering from that for a month, began chemotherapy, had 5 months of chemotherapy, and then that was the off season.
Yeah.
And he needed to ramp up. And I think what they got from him was darn near miraculous.
Yeah.
And I think that you're going to have, a much stronger year from him next year. And if you look at the stats, Stan, as you have, you'll see that when he was the DH, he hit much better than when he played first base.
Yeah.
So having Mountcastle at first base and Mancini at DH in 2022 could be much better, assuming that, of course, Trey is here.
And yeah, exactly. Assuming Trey is here. Do you see any chance at all of somehow the club and Trey working out a 2 or 3 year extension to where he's at now, or you don't see that being at all in the club's best interest?
I think it is in the club's best interest for a lot of reasons. And I think it's because I think Trey Mancini fits the Orioles better than he fits almost anywhere else. And a lot of it is for an intangible reason. You have a very young club here, and let's say you traded him. You don't have a real adult on the club. You need a veteran player. As Ross knows, Ross knows a lot about clubhouse chemistry and the kind of clubhouse chemistry, the Orioles had in the 70s and early 80s.
Ross is the adult on these Zooms. That's why I have him.
Gee, thanks.
But I think Mancini can show players, by his example, by what he's been through. And as I said, I think he is so much more valuable here than he would be, with another club. And for fans to say, well, when they get good, he may not be here. But I think it's okay. I mean, I think it's okay to have someone who maybe isn't in the prime of their career serving as a sounding board, as a mentor. Look at the Nationals. They've kept Ryan Zimmerman around. Of course, Ryan Zimmerman has played a lot longer than Trey Mancini, but they understand the reason that he's valuable to the club. Mike Rizzo has said that, if Zimmerman wants to come back next year, he's welcome to. And there's a club that's going to look a lot like the Orioles next year. A rebuilding club. Of course, they have a terrific player in Juan Soto, but having Zimmerman sort of be the mentor there and Mancini here, I think that would be a very good thing.
I'd like to see it myself. One more before I turn you back over to Ross for a couple. John Means. John Means last year, his first 11 starts, of course, we know about the no-hitter out in Seattle. He threw to a 2.05 ERA. Opponents hit 173 against him, 218 on base percentage. His whip was 0.79. He then missed all that time, about 5 or 6 weeks. And in his last 14 starts, the ERA was 4.88. The batting average against was 260. The OPS was 792, where it had been 532. Did he pitch his way back into being a bit of a suspect? Or again, because my contention to him, I love John Means when he's healthy, but there's been injury problems in all 3 of his seasons.
Well, Stan, I think that the early, the first month or 6 weeks of John Means was probably unsustainable.
Right.
Those were terrific stats. But you look at a lot of his starts, especially late in the season, he didn't get a lot of run support. And he'd go out of the game, and oftentimes the bullpen wouldn't hold the lead, and he never complained. He never said, he always blamed himself. And I think that, 1 or 2 of those games really inflated those numbers. I think his first game that he came back after missing the 6 weeks, he was, he had done poorly, and there were a couple others, but I think that he pitched overall. His WAR was really high. High, and he just happened to play in a really not a very good club.
Yeah,
and I think that he's for the moment he's their only real starter, and I think that there's so many other things to complain about on this team that to complain about John Means is I think a bit short.
I picked out the 2 guys in Mancini and him where I want to make sure that they feel comfortable that what happened in the second half of the year is not the real person on either case. Ross,
well, but I mean, you are what your stats say you are. But I think especially with Mancini, the fact that he played 147 games,
was
after what he went through was just wonderful.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, Rich, let me, December 2nd, the collective bargaining agreement is up. They're going to go for a new one. It's really hush hush. You don't hear a lot. Rule changes. What have you heard? What do you know? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, one of the things discussed is the $100 million minimum salary for a team. That will really make a difference in the Orioles, what they do. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I saw an article today by the fine Associated Press writer, Ron Blum, who's pretty plugged in, who says that people on both sides, don't see a way to avoid a work stoppage. I of course hope that's wrong, and I'm thinking maybe there is a way around it. I'm always an optimist when it comes to this stuff, but you, having been through some of the labor wars, know how difficult it is, and nobody really wins in the strike. I come from a union background, where my father worked for a large company, Western Union, that seemingly went on strike every 3 years. And he basically taught me that nobody wins in a strike, that what you get after being out, it may incrementally feel better, look better, but you've lost so much. But what would be a shame here is that the game, which is still a great game but has so many problems, will lose here,
right?
Because fans will just say, "Oh, it's millionaires versus billionaires," and it'll turn people off. Here it is, in December, the clubs want to sell tickets. Players want to know where they're going to be playing next year, and if you have a strike or a lockout, they're not going to know. I think locking the players out, which is something that I've heard is a possibility, is a way of unnerving the players, because I don't think that there's going to be much activity or any on the free agent market from the end of the World Series until the beginning of December, because there's going to be so much uncertainty, and I think that it may look kind of suspicious if there's very little activity. But that's a bad thing. You can have because what would happen would be, let's say they had a lockout and they settled it in time for spring training 2 months later. Well, then you would have an expedited free agent system. Now, they have that in all the other sports. In football, basketball, and hockey, their free agency is basically over in a few days. And you could do that in baseball, but it wouldn't create the huge market for these star players. You look at an agent like Scott Boras, and he likes to take his time with his clients to sort of build a market and not have them sign real quickly. And if the owners lock the players out, then it's kind of defeating the purpose of that, because once it's settled, the free agent market will have to move quickly, and you may not get those big contracts anymore, or for the time being.
Right. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, obviously, if there's a strike, the minor leagues will probably play anyway.
Sure.
What do you think about the minor league housing per diem to the players? That's something I think is really fantastic. Being in minor leagues for 31 years and seeing these guys struggle and what have you, especially with families, I think this is a great thing. But one of the questions I wanted to ask, it's going to be X number of dollars going. Where is that money coming from? Where are they going to cut it at the other end?
Well, I think some of them already did, because they cut a full season affiliate. I mean, ask the fans in Frederick who don't have the Frederick Keys anymore. And it wasn't as if they're some of the money went to higher salaries, but I think that they'll not. I think that there won't be, salaries won't go up very much here in the minor leagues, because they'll be spending the money on housing. But if the players if the players are already having the housing taken care of, well, then it's I think it'll be 6 of one, half dozen of the other ones.
Yeah.
We're talking with Rich Dubroff, who's the chief editor and content provider for BaltimoreBaseball.com, one of the leading providers of Orioles information in the market. Rich, you've been covering the Orioles now, first with Comcast, then with Pressbox, and now with BaltimoreBaseball.com. Been about 10 years, correct?
Right, you are. And I'm
Is-
not the chief editor. I'm not the chief editor. Actually, our friend Jack Gibbons says the title.
I'm
of
sorry,
editor.
I didn't mean to take away his title. All right, I'm sorry. You are the chief content provider, though,
Okay.
for BaltimoreBaseball.com. Of all the things you've witnessed in the 10 years covering, and you're a longtime baseball fan, where do you put the Cedric Mullins season this year in terms of like a shot out of a bolt out of the sky, you know?
Yeah, it really was. It really was amazing. In a year that was pretty forgettable, he provided a lot of interesting moments. I never thought he was capable of
Right.
hitting 30 home runs. I never saw that at all. And of course, in 2019, when they sent him back to Norfolk and they sent him then back to Bowie, I didn't think that there was much. I didn't think that there was much, upside potential.
Yeah.
So it was, it was certainly a surprise, Stan.
So let me ask you the question, and I've told this story. Ross knows the story now from me. Back to 1986 when Earl Weaver came back to manage the Orioles. He had actually come back the second half of '85. Floyd Rayford and Mike Young hit out of this world for like 2.5 months. And everybody said, hey, the Orioles in '86, we got Murray, Ripken, Rayford, and Young. It's going to be a powerhouse team. And early in the season, I was critical of Eddie Murray, who was off to a slow start. And Weaver comes up to me one day, he says, I really think I'm worried about what Eddie Murray's going to do this year. He's done it before. His numbers will be there at the end of the year. And while they were down a little bit, they kind of were. Weaver says to me, the two guys that you got to worry about are those two over there. And he pointed to Young and Rayford. Boy, was he ever right. Do we stand the chance of being so enamored with the season Mullins have that we will be unforgiving if it drops back down to, a 260 average, 15 homers? He's still solid defensively, still steals 30 bases, or do we have him plugged in now as he's that type of player?
Well, fans will have him plugged in as if he's that type of player. And, now he's going to have to do it again. I mean, that's what professionals do.
Yeah. Okay. Ross.
That's why you don't win 20 games. They expect you to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that won't happen now, but that's.
You got one, Ross?
Oh, yeah. Oh, geez. And Rich, I have to ask you about this. I mean, I can't let this go by, but the Orioles got rid of some coaches, Long, Kendall, Allen Mills. It's crazy since 2019 when the new regime took over. They have really cut the strings with a lot of baseball people. And what I mean by that is people who have been in the game, who played the game, Kendall's got 26 years here. In the past, they have let go of some baseball people that were really outstanding and could really be a big help anywhere they go, especially here in Baltimore. But what are your thoughts on that? What is and my thing is, who are they replacing them with? Some guy from some facility or some high school coach or what's the deal? I don't really get it, and I haven't heard really anything about it.
I mean, I think they're just going younger I think they're going younger and cheaper, and they think that having people who are younger have new and different ideas. I'm with you. I like I like guys who've done it. Guys who've done it before, who've had long careers in player development. What we'll see how it works.
Yeah.
All right,
Stan?
Let me jump in. The infield, Rich, we pretty much can.
Well, I have to get going. Stan, we're about half hour into this.
Okay, my last question. All right.
Okay.
The infielders are pretty well, I mean, the corners, excuse me, outfield and first base are pretty well set. We know that catching is going to be relying on whether they're going to play or not at the beginning of the year. The infield, though, second base, shortstop, and third base. What do you think this year coming?
I think that, I think that a year from now, we may be talking about Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westberg there. But I think that, I think that they'll be active in the offseason to try and get some, get some other infielders, and they want to take a look at Ramon Urias and maybe Gutierrez and Jorge Mateo. I think those are guys that have certainly have a leg up, but they want to look at some of the other some of the other players that may be out there in the free agent, the trade market. So I think that the infield is not set at all.
All right. He's Rich Dubroff. He's the chief content provider for BaltimoreBaseball.com, one of the best reads in the market. Thank you very much for spending some time with us, Rich. We'll talk to you during the off season. All right.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. For Ross Grimsley and Rich Dubroff, I'm Stan the Fan Charles. I'll be on Wednesday night at 7:00 with the women's basketball coach of Towson University, Diane Richardson. Thanks. I'll see you soon.